Welcome to this tutorial on responsive design with CSS media queries. As more and more people access the website on a variety of devices, from smartphones to tablets to laptops and desktops, creating designs that look great and function well on all these devices has become increasingly important. That's where responsive design comes in. In this tutorial, we'll explore the basics of responsive design and how to use CSS media queries to create flexible, adaptable layouts that look great on any screen size. We'll cover common breakpoints, best practices, and examples of responsive design in action. We're also going to get hands-on and make a website we built in a previous tutorial responsive. So by the end of this tutorial, you have the skills you need to create your own responsive designs and ensure that your content is accessible to users on any device. Let's get started. So I'm going to walk you through all the basics of responsiveness with CSS. So the first thing to take note of is that the responsiveness starts in this head of your HTML document. You have to precise this meta tag you see here in the head of your HTML document. So you have this name, viewport, content, width equals device width, initial scale 1.0. So if you don't specify this, your website is not going to be fully responsive. You are going to have some issues with responsiveness. So most websites have issues with responsiveness just because they left out this meta tag in their head. So the good thing is you don't need to remember this offhand, because when using VS Code to boilerplate a starter template, Emmet automatically generates this information for you. For example, if I cut this and once I hit the exclamation on my keyboard, you notice this Emmet trying to propose to me. If I hit enter on my keyboard, it automatically generates this starter template. So you notice that it automatically adds this meta tag in your head. But if you are typing this manually, you need to remember this offhand, because this meta tag is very important for responsiveness. So with that out of the way, after you have added that meta tag in your head of your HTML document, you can now work with responsiveness now in your CSS file. That's where you are going to use media queries for responsiveness. So if you look at what we have now here, we just have this H1 in our body, and these other things are commented. We are going to go through them afterwards. So this H1 says working with media queries, and if we come to our body, we see working with media queries displaying here. So for the moment, it's just as we are going to expect. So the basic text on our web page, size the browser, irrespective of how we resize the browser, nothing happens. So that's the basic behavior of how the normal HTML code is going to behave. If we come to styles.css here, so first of all, the main syntax for media queries. Quickly uncomment this line. So the main syntax for media queries, you have this add media keyword, then followed by the media type, and you need this other keyword, this and keyword, and the media feature. And finally, you have the CSS rule or CSS rules inside this curly braces. So what is this media type? The media type can have a value of screen, print, speech, or all. So basically what you do is you replace this media type with either screen. For example, you can clear this media type here and you have screen, or you can replace it with print, as well as you can replace it with any of these other values. But in most cases, you are going to be using screen because you want your website to be responsive on screens, either mobile, tablet, desktop, flat screens, any screen that the website is going to display on. So in most cases, you are going to be using screen as the media type. And you have now the media feature. So the media feature here, as I explained, refers to the width or orientation of the screen. So since, as we know, our screens have different sizes, you need to target the particular size for which you want your website to display on. So that's what brings in the responsiveness. So we're going to just see that briefly below here with the basic example. So for this basic example, we have the add media keyword, as I mentioned, that indicates that this is a media query. You have the screen, as usual in most cases we'll be working with screens. Then you have the and keyword separating the media type and the media feature. The media feature in this case is what we need to understand. So we have a max width of 600 pixels. So what we're indicating here is this style should apply for screens below 600 pixels. That's from 0 to 600 pixels, because the maximum should be 600 pixels. Then we are now applying the color of red to the h1 in our index.html. So we want this h1 to be red for screens that are less than 600 pixels, from 0 to 600 pixels. So if I quickly comment these lines above so that we can save now and see how it takes effect in our browser. So I'm quickly going to open up our inspector. Okay, so you see that the color is black when the width of our browser is greater than 600 pixels. And to see the width, you look at this right value. Sorry, this left value at the top here. This first left value is the width value, and you notice that as I move this edge of the browser, the value reduces. It increases when I move right because the width of the browser is increasing, and it decreases as I move left. So you notice that value is not yet 600 pixels. It's still above 600 pixels. That's why the color of our text is black. But immediately it hits 600 pixels, it goes to red. So for any width less than 600 pixels, from 0 to 600 pixels, the text is red. And that's what this media query here indicates. So max width 600 pixels. And I've gone ahead and I have a slide which is going to quickly explain that. So a max width of 600 pixels, this is the case here. So as I explained, when they say max width of 600 pixels, it means any width from 0 to 600 pixels. And you see that this range is valid. So as the browser width moves from 0 to 600 pixels, this CSS rule, the CSS rule you applied is going to take effect. And you notice that this value can always change. So in case where the user decides for it to be like, let's say 800 pixels, and he has to move, the range is going to increase. Let's say maybe you choose a higher value, then they are going to be increasing the width of the range for which it takes effect. So if you say, for example, 800 pixels, the max width should be 800 pixels. It means you want from 0 to that 800 pixels for the CSS rule to take effect. So if we head back to our CSS, for example, and we say here 800 pixels, so you can basically put any value here, but max width is always going to start from 0 to that value you specify, and you save. Then you go back to your media query. You notice now that it's red, and even when we pass 600 pixels, it's still red. It's still, we hit 800 pixels. That is going to take note. It's this value on top here is the width of your browser. So when it hits 800 pixels, it goes back to black. Okay, so that's it for maximum width. So you notice that this media feature here can also be min width. So you can either use max or min width, and those are the two that you are going to be using in conjunction. So when you have min width, is the other case round, is the other way around. So min width is indicating that the CSS rule inside this media query is going to apply for all screens greater than this width. So it's from the highest value of the width of your screen till 800 pixels, and below 800 pixels the media query is not going to apply. So 800 pixels is the minimum width for which the media query should apply. And if you don't understand that, you can take a look at it visually. So this is what I'm trying to explain. Based on the width of your screen can be, let's say, 1200 pixels, but others can have wider screens. In cases you have a wider screen, it may be, let's say, even let's say 1366, where the screen width is going to be somewhere here. So in that case, the min width is always going to start from the highest value of the width of your screen till the value is specified here in your media query. So in this case, if we say 600 pixels, let's take it back to 600 pixels. So a min width of 600 pixels is going to apply the media query from the highest width to 600 pixels. Then below 600 pixels, the media query is not applied. So if we save this and try it in our browser, you notice that above 600 pixels, which is the width is this first value as we explained. Notice that above 600 pixels, the media query applies and the color is red as we indicate here. But immediately we go below 600 pixels, which is this other portion, the media query is not going to be applied. So as we reduce and we pass 600 pixels, the color is going to go back to black. So that's it. So you just need to always come back. You can use this PowerPoint as reference in case you have some confusion between max and min width, and it's going to better still. Okay, so the next part is with multiple rules. So you notice here that initially I just used a single rule, which we were targeting our H1 in our HTML. We're targeting our H1 in our HTML, but you can as well have multiple rules. Multiple rules now meaning you can put different selectors here. In this case, I'm using 2 selectors instead of 1. So you can have as many selectors as you want inside this media query. And the style you apply is going to take effect once the media query is effective. So in this case, let me comment this line above here. And if we say the max width should be 600 pixels, meaning that is going to apply from width from 0 to 600 pixels as we saw in our slide. From 0 to that 600 pixels. In this case, don't bother as it's 800 pixels. So it's going to take effect from 0 to 600 pixels. Then above that, it's no longer going to take effect. So what's going to happen is our H1 is going to have a color of red from 0 to 600 pixels, and our paragraph is going to have a color of blue. So let's go ahead and comment that paragraph. So that's what's going to happen. And if we save now and take a look in our browser, you notice that from 0 pixels is red and background color of blue for the paragraph. And as we move, it's still red and background color of blue. That's when the width is below 600 pixels. But immediately the width goes above 600 pixels, everything goes back to its default values. Okay. So the next thing we are looking at now is multiple media features. So in these cases, we have been handling only one media feature, which was either using the minimum or maximum width. But you see here that we can combine multiple media features. We can combine multiple media features, and here we are combining the minimum and maximum width media features. You see that we are specifying on screens as usual. Then we are precising that this media query should apply when the min width is 600 pixels and the max width is 1000 pixels. Basically, what this is just saying is the media query should apply for screens. The CSS rules inside here should apply for when the width is between 600 and 1000 pixels. So if we save this, let me first of all comment what is above here. So if we save this and take a look in our browser, so I'm first of all going to explain from this slide for those who don't clearly understand. So I think as we saw for the case where the min width is 600 pixels, we know that what we're explaining is from the highest width of your browser till 600 pixels, the media query should be applied. And for the case of the max width, 1000 pixels is from the lowest width, that's 0 pixels to 1000 pixels. So if you use the and conjunction word, actually we want it to apply for both cases. And you notice that the intersection between these two portions is actually between 600 and 1000 pixels. So this is the valid region for which the style is going to be applied. And to put it simple, it's just the same as saying between 600 and 1000 pixels, we want the media query to apply. So if we save now and head to our browser, notice that when the width is below 600 pixels, its default color black. But once it hits 600 pixels, it goes to red, and it's going to stay red, which is actually our CSS rule, till we go above 1000 pixels. So between 600 and 1000 pixels is going to be red, but immediately it goes above 1000 pixels, it goes back to black. See now that it goes back to black. Okay, so the next one is now multiple media types. So I've seen multiple media features where we can combine this min width and max width here. And now we're going to be looking at multiple media types. So we saw we have been using the screen media type in most cases, and that's most of the time that's all we're going to be using. But I just said let me also explain the print media type. So in this case, we are combining both screen and print media type. So if you try to understand this syntax here, you notice that if I first of all take away this print, for example, so that we have only the screen media type. So this rule here is explaining that we want this CSS, these are CSS rules inside here to take effect on screens. You notice here that the media feature is absent because normally we're going to have the and keyword followed by one or multiple media types, as we see in the cases above. But here we don't have any media type following any and keyword and media type following this screen media type. So basically this CSS is going to apply for all screen sizes because we have not restricted any screen size for it to apply. And if we save this, it's just the same like in the previous cases when we are working with simple CSS without media queries, where we have just h1, for example, without using any media type there. So basically what this does is it applies the CSS rule for all screen sizes. So you see that the color is going to stay red using the CSS rule. And if we go back to the screen, just having screen here without specifying any width is doing the same thing in this case. So it's applying that color of red to all screen sizes. So basically it's not going to make sense to even use to add this and add media and screen and just put only a CSS rule without specifying the width, because it's giving you more work which you could have done simply by doing this. Yeah, so in this case I'm adding the print media type here so that I can explain something. So here what we are doing is we are saying apply this styling inside here for both when the media type is screen and when the media type is print. We want the color to be red. So what's the print media type? First of all, you know that the screen media type is just the screen. It's just the screen of your device, either the mobile, tablet, or laptop screen. So when we talk of screen, we are just referring to the browser, as you see here, and you see that it's actually applying a color and each one of red for screens. So the print media type is actually when you, let's say for example, you want to print a document and you click on print here, you notice that it opens a printer, the print preview, and in the print preview you actually see your document you want to print here. And in this case it's actually the same content on your web page, but here the color is black. So it goes back to the default color, which is black, without considering these CSS rules in your HTML, in your CSS. So if you add the print media type here now, what you are saying is for both the browser screen and when you want to print, let the H1 be red. So it's going to now make this text red when you want to print. And if we save and take a look at it, if I right click now to print, you are going now to notice that the text is going to be red as well. So that's how the print media type works. Okay. So the next thing we are going to be looking at is the different forms in which you frequently find or see media queries. So media queries are the common syntax which you have found of seeing media queries is this syntax here, and it's what I've been using so far. This first syntax where you have the at media keyword, you have the media type, screen in most cases, you have this and keyword, then you now have the media feature here where you specify the width or the width for which you want the media, the CSS rule inside here to apply. So this is the basic syntax we have been seeing so far. But in some cases, if you are working on some code with someone else, or you have seen in some places where you have this only keyword before the screen, So this only keyword is just indicating that this media query should apply only for screens. So in other words, this is the same as doing this, because if you don't precise the only and you put only screens here, it's clear that it's going to apply only for screens. Then you have this other one now, where you don't even have the media type precise here. So you just have add media, and directly after add media you have your media feature. So no media type screen or print is precedes the add media before you have the media feature here. So in this case, what you're doing here is you're basically applying this media, this CSS rule to all media types. So we don't precise the media type here. It's going to apply to all media types, and as we saw, the media types are screen, print, speech, and all. So when you don't precise the media type here, it applies to all of them. And since our screen is included in all the media types, it's included among the media types, this CSS rule as well is going to apply to screens. So it's applying to both screens, print, speech, and to all media types. So when you don't precise it, basically it's the same as saying all. So when you use all here, it's going to apply to all of them, including the screens. So you can use any of the syntax to apply media queries to your web page, and you can see that that's somehow equivalent. All of them are equivalent. They're going to do the same thing when you put your media feature. That's basically applying the CSS rule based on the device width of your screen, since as all of them precise screen as one of the media types for which the CSS rule should be applied. So you can use any of them, but most people use this one because it's shorter. So you can feel free to use this one, and most people use this one because it's explicit and it mentions screen here, but they're going to do the same thing. So there's one interesting thing, at least one key takeaway you can draw from this video, and it's working with the latest syntax for media queries, which is the inequalities, the range syntax for working with media queries. So it simplifies working with media queries and makes the syntax look a lot simpler. So the syntax is as such. So rather than you using this max width 600 pixels, which you understood, the max width in this case means from 0 to 600 pixels. The maximum width should be 600 pixels. Apply the CSS rule. So it's equivalent to using this range syntax, which is a new feature in CSS, and it's supported by browsers, almost all browsers. So you can feel free to use it in your modern website. So using max width 600 pixels is equivalent to saying the width should be less than or equal to 600 pixels, because that clearly indicates that the width is going to go from 0 to 600 pixels. So if we take a look at our sketch again earlier, a max width of 800, meaning that it's going from 0 to 800 pixels, is the same like saying the width should be less than 800 pixels, meaning that from 800 pixels going down, the range is valid. So these two syntax are the same. I can probably use this one. It's simpler for anyone looking at it to understand what's happening without trying to overthink. So you have the other syntax for the opposite direction, where you're using min width instead. And when you're using min width, the equivalent syntax is to use the width greater than or equal to that value. So as we saw, min width of 1000 pixels is saying that the minimum width should be 600 pixels, but anything above is considered. So you can just use width greater than or equal to 1000 pixels. As we saw in our sketch, a min width of 600 pixels in this case is the same as saying a width greater than 600 pixels, and that's what we have here for the range syntax. And the final case is when you are combining two media features. In this case, we'll use the min width 600 and max width 600 pixels, 1000 pixels. And we understood that it means the width is between 600 and 1000 pixels. And that's when the CSS rule should be applied. So using the range syntax, you put the width and you say the width should be between 600 pixels and 1000 pixels. So this is just some simple math inequality which some of you may be familiar with. And using this is just a bit simpler on the eye and for on anyone who looks at it to understand what's happening. And we saw also here that that's what's happening between 600 and 1000 pixels. This is the valid range. So the next thing we're going to be looking at is the main breakpoints you are going to encounter when working with media queries. So media queries comes in with some breakpoints, which are mainly breakpoints for mobile tablets and desktops or larger screens. So these main breakpoints, the first main breakpoint you are going to be looking at is the mobile breakpoint. So you notice that when we talk of the width, sorry, in this case I'm looking at we can start from bottom to top, man, it's no problem. So when we talk of the width less than 600 pixels, so basically this is for mobile screens. So mobile screens don't have very large width. So when you have a width of somewhere around 500 pixels to 600 pixels, when the width is less than 600 pixels, we are targeting mobile screens. So any CSS rule we apply here is going to apply for mobile screens, because that's when the width is less than 600 pixels. And on tablet screens, which are a bit bigger, let's say from somewhere to 600 pixels to about, let's say 900 or even 1000 pixels, you can apply now some CSS rules here which you want to apply for your tablet screens. And finally, for laptop and larger screens, you can consider a width of greater than 1000 pixels. Yeah, apply your CSS rules here. So if you look at this, you understand that this is basically covering all range of screens, because once this one target from width from 0 to 600 pixels, this other one continues from 600 to 1000, and this one ends everything by taking widths which are greater than 1000 pixels. So you can have full device coverage by using these media queries to style your websites. And finally, we'll look at some examples when using the main breakpoints. So the first example we're going to be looking at is this one here, where okay, so I'm going to comment them one after another so that we see. Okay, so this first one is we're targeting screens as usual, and we're applying the styles here when the width is less than 600 pixels. That's basically for mobile screens, as we were trying to explain. So here we see the H1 should have a color of red. The element with a class of small should have a display of block. So display of block basically means that the element should display, because if it's a block level element, the default display value is block. So applying a display of block just means the element should display on the screen. And the opposite of display block is to give you a display of none, so that the element does not display on the screen. So basically, we want the element with the class of small to display on the screen. I want the elements with classes of medium and large not to display on the screen. And all that should take effect when the width is less than 600 pixels. If we go to our HTML and uncomment what we commented earlier, so that we have all the elements now on our page. Basically, what we're explaining here in our CSS is this H1, which is this heading, should have a color of red. This element with a class of small should display, and the element of the class of small is this paragraph with the text "I will show on mobile screens," which is actually true, because here we are targeting mobile screens, so we actually want this paragraph to display on mobile screens. Then the next two paragraphs with classes of medium and large, which are these other two paragraphs, should not display on mobile screens. And if you read their text inside here, their text actually explains that it should display on other screens, which we are going to see. So if we save now and take a look in our browser, we have all the paragraphs initially. Sorry, if you take a look at your browser, you notice that for mobile screens, That's as we saw here, when the width is less than 600 pixels. When the width is less than 600 pixels, remember the width is this value here at the left. The paragraph, the H1 is red as we saw. There is a paragraph which we have not even targeted at all. This paragraph, we gave it no class, so by default it's going to display on all screens. So that's why we see it here. Then now we have the following paragraph, which is the paragraph with the class of small, which we gave you a display of block, so it's going to display on mobile screens. So we see everything works below 600 pixels as the measure query indicates, till the width exceeds 600 pixels. Then everything goes back to its default value. So immediately the width exceeds 600 pixels, the web page is going to behave as if this measure query never existed. So it's going to default to the normal HTML styling that was applied here. So everything is going to display and is going to discard the existence of this measure query, because this measure query applies only when the width is less than 600 pixels. Okay, the next case is we are going to leave the previous styling and combine it with this one, because that's what you are going to be seeing in most cases. You are going to be seeing measure queries one after the other. Okay, so now we are targeting screens with width between 600 and 1000 pixels, which are actually tablet and small laptop screens. So we initially targeted this range for mobile screens which are width less than 600 pixels, and we apply these styles. So now we want the H1 to change from this red color to a blue color when the width is greater than the 600 pixels but less than 1000 pixels. We also want this paragraph. The paragraph now we want to display is the paragraph with a class of medium. So we are now applying styles to the paragraphs with classes of small and large and giving them a class of display none, meaning that we don't want those paragraphs to display in this case. That's when the width is less than 1000 but greater than 600 pixels. If we look at our HTML, these paragraphs are self-explanatory, because you see that the paragraph with a class of small has text in it that explains that it displays on small screens, which are mobile screens. The paragraph with a class of medium has text in it that explains that it displays for medium screens, which are tablet screens and small laptops. Then the large paragraph is going to display on large screens, which are laptops and bigger flat screens. So basically what we are saying here is we want the paragraph with the class of medium, which is the paragraph that has text of displaying on tablet and small laptops to display in this case. Then we want all the other paragraphs not to display. So if we take a look, we'll see that as we transition from mobile screens, the styles that were defined for mobile screens take effect. So the text is red and this paragraph of I will display on mobile screens shows. So I will display on mobile screens. Then immediately it goes to a width between 600 and 1000 pixels. The paragraph now, the heading now changed to blue, and the paragraph of I will show on screens like tablets and small screens now displays, which is this paragraph. The other two paragraphs disappear. So that's what's happening in this case. And the final breakpoint, which is that of large screens, is that with a width of greater than 1000 pixels. So if you take a look here, understand that we're actually covering the full range or the full device width by first of all taking width less than 600, attack a width between 600 and 1000. Then now the final which is greater than 1000 pixels. So here we want now the H1 to have a color of blue violet. We want the paragraph with the class of large to display, and we want the other paragraphs to disappear. So if we save and we take a look in our browser, you see that initially we have this red color, which is when the width is less than 600 pixels. Once we go between 600 and 1000, the text changes to blue, and we have here I will show on screens like tablets and small laptops. And to attain the maximum, which is the width which is greater than 1000 pixels, we can close the console to the right Then we now have here a pack, the color changing to blue violet, and the text I will show on laptops and bigger flat screens. So what's the takeaway here is basically the fact that you need to specify widths that take a full coverage of your different device widths. Here we are targeting mobile, small laptops and tablets, and finally laptops and bigger flat screens. So measure queries are actually very flexible in that these values may not be exactly 600 pixels here. You may see some people use values between 500 to 600 pixels. Then here, it must not be 1000. You may see another value here. So the main idea to understand is that you can actually view the browser width if you inspect, and you notice that as you move this edge, you have the width of your browser the left here. So that can be a very useful tool to help you know the exact width at which you want to apply some particular styling. So you just need to know the width, then you can tweak your media queries to use those widths based on what you want to use. And as you are going to be seeing in the upcoming explanation, which I'm going to be transforming a website which was not responsive at all to a completely responsive website, you are going to see my thought process, and you are going to see that you can actually transform any website to become responsive by just understanding the particular width at which you want to change the look of the interface. So now we're at the part of the tutorial where we're going to learn how to transform a website which was not responsive into a fully responsive website. So this website I created, Technologize, was created in a previous tutorial. In that tutorial, I taught you guys how to use CSS Flexbox to create a navbar, and CSS positioning. You see that the navbar is sticky at the top. You have some cards which are relatively positioned, some at the bottom and some at the top. And we accomplish this using mainly CSS Flexbox and CSS positioning. So if you have any issues with CSS Flexbox and CSS positioning, you have the links in the card above. You can check out those links and learn how to work with Flexbox, which is a must know for all web developers. So you check out Flexbox in that tutorial above. So now our interest is making this website responsive, because if we take a look at it now, it looks fine on large screens, but for mobile screens, it's not responsive at all. So one way you can test the responsiveness of the website is to either right click, go to inspect, and when you go to inspect, you can now shrink your browser by hovering over this site, and you notice this arrow appears. So you can now shrink the browser. I notice that this is for mobile screens. You notice that everything is squashed next to each other. There is no space, breathing space. Technologize is hidden. All the links are no space for the links. Notice that I can now expand the browser as well. As I'm expanding it, you still notice that there is no space for the different elements on the page. And the only size of the browser where things start looking good is when the browser is already at really large. You can see from here that's about 1000 pixels in width and above, where things start looking a bit good. But you still notice that there's not enough space for these elements to stand next to each other. So we're going to see how to make this website responsive. So as we saw in this preview, let's see here, the website looks pretty responsive from this preview. Notice that for medium-sized screens, things look good. When it even goes down to mobile, notice now that the elements stack next to each other vertically, and the website really looks good. We have made some of the links to disappear on the top nav bar. So that's what we're going to be going for this tutorial, to make things look as responsive as you see in this preview. Okay, back to our tutorial. Let's now see. We're going to be starting with this pricing plan section, because from what we see, it's actually the section which needs more work to be done on. Look at this pricing plan section. You see that immediately you reach this screen size and you start reducing, there's no space for the elements, and they start squeezing next to each other and things just fall out of place. So the first thing we're going to be doing here is we're going to remove this relative positioning applied to these different pricing plan items so that they stand horizontally, because the only level it makes sense is when it's on large screens, you see that they have space next to each other, and it looks a bit stylish. But once we go to smaller screens of smaller widths, this up and down effect we applied is not really good. So I'm going to take away that relative positioning and apply the default static positioning for HTML elements. So let's head to our HTML, and we're just going to first of all select this relative up and relative down. Let's just comment them. So that things it does not affect our workflow. So we comment here and see. Notice that the elements are going now to be all horizontally on the same line, no element up and no element down. So from there we can now start working, and what we are going to do is we want some of these pricing plans to move to the next line once there is no more horizontal space. So how can we achieve that? Notice that these different 4 pricing plans are inside the flex container. So if I click on this arrow to inspect and I hover over the different pricing plans, notice that here we have a pricing plan container. When I hover over the pricing plan container, you see this flex here. So these pricing plans, all these different pricing plan items are inside this pricing plan container with a class of plan container, and it's the one that has this display of flex. So it's basically the same thing as CSS. If you scroll up to the top, you have this pricing plan container which has a display of flex on it, and space evenly is what is permitting these items to be spaced evenly even on large screens. It's what gives them the space evenly around them. So what I want to do is want to add an additional property to this pricing plan container, which is going to make the items move to the next line once there is no more horizontal space. So we're going to come to this pricing container and add a new property to it called a flex wrap. So if you add a flex wrap and give it a value of wrap, it's going to make these items move to the next line once there is no more horizontal space. So if we save now, you notice that flex wrap, not flex direction, flex wrap. If we save now, notice that once there is no more horizontal space, the element went to the next line, and once they come close to each other until there is no more horizontal space, it goes to the next line. If I reduce again, once they come close to each other until there is no more horizontal space, that is going to go to the next line. So you notice that things have already started looking good. But what we want to do is we want to space out the items also vertically. So we want some space to be between the items vertically, and to accomplish that, to give some space between them, as we see in that preview, we're going to give a gap to the flex container. So it's going to be applied, it's going to give a gap horizontally and vertically. So we can give a gap here, and let's just give it a gap of, let's just say 30 pixels and see. So I'm giving a gap of 30 pixels. I see that things have started taking shape. The items are spaced, they have some margin around them both horizontally and vertically. You see that additional space we just gave, that space which is the gap is what gives this spacing between the items which are vertical. So even when we come to the level where there is just one per line, notice that you see that gap between them, and it's this 20 pixels we gave here, 30 pixels, which is this gap we have here vertically. So I think we can say this pricing plan section has already taken, and it looks really good, because you notice that the items two, when there is some space here and when we increase, another one is going to move up to the next line, and when there's more space, which is the largest screen, you have the 4 of them on the same line. So I think this pricing plan section is okay. The next thing we're going to be looking at now is this nav bar at the top. Notice that this nav bar, as we reduce these different nav links, these 4 nav links are present, and because they are present, there's not enough space for all of them in the nav bar, and they start compressing. So what we can do is we can make some nav links to disappear as the screen size reduces. So let's just say at this level, we'll just call it, let's take a look at the top here. You see that the browser width is at about, let's just say 800 pixels. At 800 pixels, we want the pricing, about, and login links to disappear at 800 pixels. So we're going to come to our CSS, and we're going now to use major queries here So we're going to say add media screens for screens, and when the width, so here we're using the range syntax which uses these inequalities. So we're going to say when the width is less than or equal to we said 800 pixels, we want the pricing link, about link, and login link to disappear. So we're going to give these TV links a particular CSS class we'll call disappear, and we're going to make them disappear by giving them a display of none. So we're going to come to our HTML and select these TV links, pricing, about, and login. We give them a class of disappear, as you see here. TV of them have the class of disappear. So we want these TV links to disappear, these TV links with the class of disappear to disappear. So we're going to come back to our CSS and we're going to select the links. Here it is an missing and. So we're going to select the links dot disappear. They are the class of disappear as we saw, which we added. And we're going to say the links with the class of disappear should have a display of none when the width of the screen is less than 800 pixels. That are going to disappear. So we'll give them a display of none and receive. Notice now that they disappear because the browser width is, look at the top, the browser width is reducing, and immediately it hits 800 pixels. Those links disappear. I see now that we have enough space in the nav bar, and we have pretty much space now in the nav bar, and we can say things are okay till we hit another breakpoint, till we reach a level at this level. Let's say at about 385 pixels. At 385 pixels, we want to take away this padding around the nav bar. If I click here to inspect and I click here, I've clicked on the nav bar. You see that the nav bar is selected. The nav bar is selected with the class of nav container. If we come down here to these styles and we come to where we have the computed, so on the styles here, and if you slide down to where we have this showing the different portions of the nav bar, when we're here, this blue portion is the content area. And if you remember the tutorial on the box model, where I explained how the box model is very important and is the heart of CSS, you are going to remember from that tutorial that we have this content area for an element. We have the pattern which surrounds the content area, and we have the margin that takes the element away from all the elements. So here we have the content area, which is fine, but we have some padding around this nav bar. I notice that this padding has 40 pixels to the left and right of the nav bar, and it has 15 pixels from the top and bottom. Notice that the fact that this pattern is 40 pixels for this case makes the nav bar, makes us not have enough space for the different items as we reduce the browser. So we want to reduce this pattern around the nav bar to something like, instead of 40 pixels, let's give it 10 pixels so that these elements have more space. So I'm going to come to our HTML and say we saw that the width was from about 385 pixels. From 385 pixels, we want to reduce the padding. So I'm going to come here and say add media screens, and when the width is less than 385 pixels, when the width is less than 385 pixels, have to be an and here. We want to reduce the padding around the nav bar. If we click here and inspect the nav bar, it has a class of nav container. So we're going to say the nav container should have a reduced padding. We're going to leave the 15 pixels at the top and bottom of the nav bar, but reduce the padding at the left and right. We're going to give just 10 pixels of padding left and right. So let's just say the padding is going to be 15 pixels at the top and bottom, but now instead of 40 pixels at the left and right, we'll give it 10 pixels and we save. So when we save now, you notice now that these elements now have more space to read. That's still at about 385 pixels now. Instead of them compressing, they get more space to read because that padding has reduced. Notice that if we hover over here, instead of 15 pixels, which was more padding to the left and right, we now have just 10 pixels, which is small, and so there's more space for the navbar items, navbar elements. So that's good for the navbar. The next thing we'll be looking at now is this hero section, where we'll have this technologize and the image. Notice that when the browser is big, the image is present and things are fine. But as we start reducing the browser to a certain level, notice that the image normally should not even be there. That's, we don't even want the image to be visible at a certain width. And let's just assume that we don't want the image to be visible at let's say from about 950 pixels. We don't want the image to be visible. So we're going to come to our HTML and still apply the display of, since as we already had 800 pixels here, let's just keep this width. So from widths which are less than 850 pixels, in addition to this navbar links disappearing, pricing, about, and login, we want the image to disappear as well. So when this pricing, about, and login links are disappearing, which is at this level, we want the image to disappear as well. So the same at this level here, we're going to just apply now the styles to the image. So this image, if we click here and click on the image to inspect, we see that this image is inside this write items section of our web page. So this write items class, which is the div at the write items. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this write items and make it disappear. So I'm going to, in addition to this disappear, I'm going to grab the write items here and apply a display of none as well, so that it's going to disappear. And if you see, you notice that it disappears. So it's present here above 800 pixels, but once it reaches 800 pixels and below, the image disappears, as well as the links in the navbar. So that's looking fine, but you notice that this technologize is hiding below the navbar. So we want to bring it down. And if you think well, you notice that is the nav, is the margin HTML element that can take away this element from the top. So I'm going to give you a margin top so that it comes down. So if you click here to inspect the element, click on technologize, notice that this technologize is inside this div, which has a class of left items. So we want to move this div, this left items div completely below. So we want to give it a margin top so that it comes down. And we'll just come to our HTML, and we're going to do that the same at this 800 pixels when the image disappears and the links in the navbar disappear. We want the technologize to come down as well. So we're going to give the margin at this level. So we're going to give a margin as you saw, the technologize inside this left item. So we're going to select it, dot left items. We're going to give you a margin top. Sorry if you only spell margin top of, let's just say 40 pixels and save. So you see that the technologize now is no more hidden below the navbar, it's clearly visible, and things look good as well till we reach a certain level. Let's say at this level here, you see that the technologize is too big to be fully seen. So what I want to do is I want to reduce the size of this technologize text. I want to reduce its size at this level. Let's just say from about let's say 550 pixels. From about 550 pixels and below, we want the size of technologize to reduce. So if we click here and inspect technologize, we are going to observe that this technologize is inside this left items div. So this technologize is inside this left items div. And if you come to the styles here to the right, we notice that it has 4 rems. 4 rems means 4 times the root font size, and that's why it looks very big when compared to the others, because it's 4 times the root font size, which is 16 pixels. So the font size of this technologize is, in other words, 4 times 16. So what we want to do is we want to reduce this font size. And if you don't understand relative measurement units, font sizes, and percentages, pixels, I have a tutorial on that, a full tutorial on that explains it in detail. So just check it up in the card above. You can watch that tutorial. But if not, as I'm saying, in summary of that, you just have 4 times 16 pixels. That's why it's this big. So we'll just reduce this value to 2. So that is 2 times 16 pixels, and it reduces in size. So we are going to say, as we said, from browser width of 550 pixels. So I'm going to come here, media queries. Let's just make the media queries to be in chronological order, descending order of pixel value. So I'm going to put in the middle of the 800 pixels media query and 385 pixel media query. So I'm going to select here and say add media screens, and when the width is less than or equal to 550 pixels, what I want is this technologize h1 inside this div, left items div. So I'm going to select the h1 inside the left items div, and I want its font size to now be 2 rems instead of 4 rems, and I save. So you notice that the font size reduces, and it's now, instead of 4 rems, we'll now see its value here 2 rems, and things look fine now. You can see the website is pretty fine. It's fully responsive now, and we can take a better preview of this by coming here to this mobile inspector, toggle device toolbar. So if you click here, you can now view it on different devices directly. So if I click on iPhone SE, you see how the website is going to look like when a user uses his iPhone to navigate to this website. If we click on iPhone XR, you see how it's going to look like when a user uses an iPhone XR to preview it. You can click on all these other devices, and you see how it's going to look like on all these devices. So that's basically how responsiveness works. You just preview it on these devices here. Yeah, so guys, that's it for this tutorial. And I think with this tutorial, you can go ahead and build amazing websites which are fully responsive. Understanding the major queries, understanding that you need to precise the particular screen width for which you want the major query to apply, and you select the element, we put the styles you want to apply for those particular screen widths. That's all you need to know about major queries, and you just need now to do more practice with different projects, and I think it's going to be okay. I've basically explained everything. So if you got some value from this tutorial, if you learned something new from this tutorial, go ahead and give at least a like to this tutorial if you are not going to be subscribing. That helps me a lot, and I'm going to see you in the next tutorial series.